Hi everyone, welcome back to Nibs, the podcast. I'm your host MILEN1ST.
I'm your host Paul Antonio, and this is where we discuss
everything about calligraphy, lettering, and sign painting. A new episode, finally.
All right. So in this episode, we're going to talk about developing your own style.
Developing your own style, teaching classes and workshops, and
old school calligraphers versus new school calligraphers.
Okay. So what do you think is best to start with?
Let's start with developing your own style.
Okay. Just before, because you're probably mostly going to talk about this, I just want to drop a few things which I think people might be interested, because like me, I started because of Theos and I was attracted to his own style. I mean, it's still fractal, but it's something unique. And I know for sure a lot of people, they start calligraphy with this idea. They want to have their own style. But starting with right away developing your own style, I don't think it really works. So I think something around this. I mean, at what point can you start thinking about your own style? I mean, I guess you have to start with the basic, the rules and everything that's in traditional calligraphy in order to come to the point of thinking about own style. Or am I wrong? Yeah, start. I mean, it's a good start. We're starting laughing.
We always start laughing. So developing your own style. Now, there are a few approaches to this. So as Milen said, he was drawn to calligraphy because of Thioson's work. Thioson's work is principally fracture. Of course, Adam does tons of other scripts as well. He does, some Spencerian and some copperplate and some metallic. So, don't just put him in a box. He does quite a lot of other things, just sort of.
No, I know that. I'm not putting him in a box, but his signature style is, it's fracture.
But people listening in, they might not know that he does other things. So, look him up, look at some of the other stuff that he does. The stuff that he does for his tattoo work is also equally different to the stuff that he does for his calligraphy work.
Yes, but I think Theos is mostly known for his fracture. Just dropping this. Okay.
So, developing your own style. Like I said, there are a number of different approaches here. Personally, if I'm talking about it from my perspective, I wouldn't suggest you develop your own style until you have a really good command of the tools. Because unless you know what the tools can do, how are you going to know how to produce those shapes? Are you just hoping that every time you write, the tool is going to make that shape for you? So understanding what the tools are capable of is really, really important. The other thing that's really important here, over the course of our Nibs podcast, you will hear me talk about this time and time again. If you don't spend the time carefully analyzing what the tool can do, you're only wasting your money.
What do you mean, analyzing what your tool can do?
If you don't spend the time trying to work out what shapes and what lines the tool can make at the beginning and being really careful with it, if you get a brush pen and the first thing you do is press really hard on it, you can damage the tip of the brush pen. It won't go back to its original placement. And if that happens, you've just wasted your money. So taking your time to understand what the tools can do really helps you to then sit down and go, okay, so this stroke can only be produced in this way, which means every time you try to repeat the stroke, and remember the letters have groups I, N, M, E, V, W, L, T, J, H, Y, O, C, A, E, D, G, Q. Once you start putting the letters into their groups, you have repetitive shape. If you don't know how to produce that same shape over and over again, every time you try to do it, you're only guessing. So in order to develop your own style, if it's a repetitive structure where there are basic shapes that need to be repeated, you need to have a good command of the tools. If you want to develop a style, a script, I don't really like that word style. If you want to develop a script based around an historical script, well, obviously, the only way to do it is to learn the historical script first. So you learn the historical script, you try to understand what it is. And then there are some ways to do this. You can either write pages and pages of text and see how the script starts to evolve into something that is close to what you want, or you can make a list of things that you want to try to achieve. So for instance, if you're learning copperplate script, so I have this really beautiful script that I developed out of copperplate script, which I call Judy script. I named it after my mom.
Is it the one you showed me when I was in London?
Which one? The upright one.
Okay, doesn't matter.
So I wanted something that was easier to write, because, writing at 55 degrees for copperplate script is a little bit tricky. So I worked on this upright version of the script. And then I started to work out things like, how light did I want it? How airy did I want it? Did I want it to feel like grass? Because then you have really nice long ascenders. So putting together a descriptive list is really helpful because it then helps you to work out what kind of sense the script will carry. There are other aspects to developing your own script. For instance, there's a really great way of engendering structure into script based on the tool. So for instance, if you're writing the word wood.
With what?
If you're writing the word wood.
Okay.
Take a piece of wood and break it and dip it in some ink and write with it. And what you'll see is you'll see the sort of essence of the wood somehow transferring into the lettering. So that's a really interesting, you could do it with grass as well. Get some freshly cut grass and just bundle it up and dip it in ink and write the word grass. And you will get this sort of, it looks like grass blowing in the wind.
Okay.
So if you're trying to generate a specific look to the script, try and think about which tool can help you with that. Now, those are all really formal approaches.
Mm-hmm.
A much more informal approach is, for instance, maybe you want to do something that is not regular. All the curves of the C's and the O's and the A's and the D, the G, and the Q, those bold-based letters, maybe you don't want to make them the same shape. So in that instance, what you would do is you would write out a page of text very, very loosely, very, very, try it with different tools, try it with really flexible pointed tools, medium flexibility, very rigid, and then try it with other kinds of tools. Like try it with something that is like a broad edge nib or a parallel pen, or you did some Pratic pen demonstrations recently. I mean, I haven't looked at that yet. Or try it with a ruling pen. So by trying it with different tools, you get a sense of how the shapes, how the letters are formed. Write out a page of that. Once you have a page of it, make sure you write out at the top of the page which tool you've used and which ink and preferably which paper, because that then helps you to work out when you come back to it, you're not trying to figure out which tool did this. And then sit with a pen, preferably a color that is a contrasting color to what you've written in. Circle the shapes that you like and cut them out and, or scan it. And, just sort of put them around separately. The thing about digitizing work and just cutting and pasting and putting it together is once you scan the work, you tend to lose a lot of the texture of the ink. So it might be that, of course, make sure when you're writing it out, you leave enough space between the lines that you can actually cut around the letters. And then you put all the A's together and all the B's together, or put them together in their groups and see what the basic shapes are. Once you understand what those basic shapes are, you stand a much better chance of producing a script that is more consistent. It has a nicer feel to it. Then make notes. What do you like about what you've done? But most importantly, what don't you like? Because most people like to put down what they like. But if you put down what you don't like, then you're going to aim to not produce those shapes again. So that the overall effect is all about something that you really like. So those are some different ways to approach developing your own script.
But you make it sound really difficult and complicated. Like I'm thinking, okay, last time or the other time we were talking in the podcast, you told me that my fracture is it's kind of my own fracture, right?
Yes, it is.
But I haven't done all this stuff, like, and I still have developed it somehow.
But so what you've done is you've basically done it by brute force. So you've been writing the same thing over and over and over, that it starts to morph into something that you can write readily. You can just do it.
But does it mean this is a wrong way?
But by no means is it a wrong approach. The only problem with that approach is it takes time.
Well, doesn't your approach take time as well?
It wouldn't take us.
Because while we were explaining, I was in my head, damn, this probably will get, like, I don't know, super long time to do.
Okay, how long did it take you to develop your fractal?
I don't know. I don't think it's one developed.
Okay, so when did you start working on it?
I started calligraphy with fracture. This is like 8 years ago, but I'm not like, I have periods of months, sometimes like almost year that I haven't written. So I don't know.
Okay, it's funny we're talking about this because, I was thinking about a project that I did with a client maybe 6 years ago. They came to me and they brought a Perrier-Jouet bottle with the Belle Epoque lettering and the beautiful flowers. And they said, can you do some letters like this? And I said, yes, I can. But what do you want them for? She said, oh, I'd like you to design an invitation like this. I said, okay. Does the invitation do you want me to address the envelopes as well? Yes. Okay. The Belle Epoque lettering that you see on the Perrier-Jouet bottle is an Art Nouveau letter form. Art Nouveau letter forms are drawn and filled. They are not written.
Yeah, I know. So
if you are addressing envelopes, you can't be sitting there drawing out all the text and going back and fiddling in and putting this. That is completely unattainable if you're trying to address envelopes, unless the client's willing to spend like £50 an envelope, right? Which obviously they won't. So I then had to explain to the client, I said to the client, we have 3 options. Option 1 is I can develop a script based on this Belle Epoque lettering, which is around a sort of Art Nouveau style, because the scripts used by people in the Art Nouveau period, like Arthur Rackham, to write, they look like you dip spiders in ink and tell them to run across the page, right? They look really, really sort of scratchy and inky. And I mean, they're great. Arthur Rackham is one of my favorite illustrators. So I love his writing. I really love his work, but it's not clear enough for an envelope. So in order to create a script that felt like the letter forms that you see in those sort of Art Nouveau scripts, but that you could write it would take time. It would take time sort of getting all those letters, testing some different pens, seeing which ones would work, showing the client, getting their information back from them. So that should not take more than a week to develop.
What? Really?
Yeah.
But okay, you're talking. Okay, wait. First, wow.
So let me finish, right? So I gave the client. So that's option 1, right? Option 1 is that's a 15-minute time.
No, we have a few more minutes because we started.
Okay. So option 1 was, I could spend the time doing it. It would cost £500 to do all this work, come up with the script, and that I will use to address the envelopes. Option 2 is you could choose one of our standard scripts from our style sheet. And so the client said, no, I want something special. And I said, are you willing to pay the £500? Because I'm not going to get started on this until I get paid for it. And she said, and what's the third option? I said, the third option is you could go to somebody else. And she said, she said, so can we talk about the first option? I said, no, we're not talking about anything beyond this point. Either you pick a standard script or you pay the money to have something completely uniquely developed around this theme, or you go to somebody else. And if you're going to somebody else, this is the end of this conversation. Go and talk to them and let them sort it out for you. And so, over the years of generating work, people would bring things and say, can you make it look like this? And if it was a relatively relaxed copy of something that they had that could be easily pen written, and I didn't have to go back in and fill bits and pieces, that's fine. But if you are developing a style, a script from scratch, you need 10 or 12 alphabets to look at. You then have to distill them down to what is the essence of these alphabets? How vertical are they? Are they at an angle? If you're using a broad edge nib, what is the angle of the nib? Is it quite flat? Is it quite steep? If it's a pointed nib alphabet, where are you applying pressure? And can you actually get the tool to go around the turn in the place that you need to go around in order to apply the pressure? Because remember, you are writing, you're not drawing the letters. So understanding this, and we talked about this in one of the earlier podcasts about the difference between writing and lettering. Trying to develop something that is your own can either take a long time over, a protracted period of time by you repetitively doing it, or if it's something that you need to develop fairly quickly, you need to put the research in. You need to know what you're aiming for. And of course, it's not just how the letters look, because those letters might look really good when you're working on layout paper, but as soon as you go onto the paper that the client is giving you, they bleed. So apart from developing the script, you also have to work out what surfaces it's possible to write on and what tools it's possible to write with.
Okay. Wow. Like the fact that you told me that you can do it in 1 week is just, I was wow, and this is exciting news for me. But this is like you're talking about making a script style out of already existing, out of traditional, right? Is it possible to make totally new that's based on nothing?
Of course it is. It's possible to make some amazing new scripts. You then have to think about, what are the shapes of the letters?
No, we're not going. We have to go.
I think what we should do, Milan, is we should do a video on this.
Yes.
So, historically, we have something called bastardization. When you take a script and another script and you blend them, they're called a bastard hand because, they're a blended script. So, we could create all these, calligraphy masters bastard hands.
Okay, that's cool idea. Okay, we'll do it. We might do a video. Also, we can continue talking this next episode, but now we have to jump to the next topic.
Okay.
Teaching classes. I wanted to speak about this because we've talked this probably a few times. I'm very annoyed when I see people, they're like, I don't know, few months into calligraphy, sometimes maybe a year. Sometimes the people have some skills, but other times their skills are like, I said I'm not gonna swear in this, like, you get the point. They look like, and I'm really like, why people which have no skills, they've been into calligraphy just like, I don't know, a few seconds, and they already start teaching people. I get it, they want to make money, but at the same time, this is like, stop now. At the same time, this is like bad for people. Like, imagine I'm totally newbie and some dude decided to teach calligraphy after he's been into calligraphy probably 6 months or 1 year. I go and I start learning.
Nonsense.
Yes. Yeah, Paul is laughing because it's so hard for me talking without swearing. But talk about this because I'm getting really like emotional.
Okay, so there are a number of reasons I'm laughing. The first reason is you're bitching about the fact that you are angry about this. You've only been doing calligraphy for 8 years. I've been doing calligraphy for more than 3/4 of my life.
Yes, but I'm not even considered slightly that I'm gonna teach people.
Can you imagine how angry it makes me?
Wow. I don't know. You seem kind of cool about it.
Yeah, I am cool about it because I had to get myself into a mindset to not be angry every time I see something come up. So I started to, I spoke to a few people about this. I started to talk to people and try and figuring out, what made you feel that you were ready to teach? Mm. And I know it sounds a little bit condescending, but, you have no business teaching if you don't even know what you're doing. But the problem is, how does that person not know what they are not doing? So I went on this personal development course, which was really quite fascinating. And we talked about, we have a pie chart, right? And in the pie chart, you have a finger in the pie chart. And in that finger of the pie chart, this little sliver in the pie chart is everything that you know you can do, right? You know you can do that, definite.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the pie chart, there's about, like 3 fingers width in the pie chart of things that you know about, but you know that you cannot do them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the biggest part of the pie chart are things that you don't even know that exist. You don't know they exist, so you don't even know about them. So you don't know that you don't know about them, right? And so this is how I sort of see people teaching. They're teaching, but they don't know that they don't know about this. But they're teaching around it because lots of people have looked at their work and they've like, oh, your work's really good. Of course their work's good. Their work is better than the person looking at it. So that person is not a really good yardstick to look at. But you have a responsibility as a teacher. If when you look at your calligraphy, you are seeing shaky, rough lines, your letter forms are not the same, you have a problem. You should not be teaching. What you are doing is you are creating a problem for somebody else to correct later on. Because if you don't know what those letters look like, if you don't know what they really look like, if you can't write a block of text of the same letter repetitively and get it to look the same, you have no business teaching that script. I get your point about some people need to make money, but if you are making money to the detriment of somebody else, you're not a teacher.
Come on, there are so many ways you can make money. Like teaching classes is not the only way for a calligrapher to make money, right?
Okay, so let's sort of look at this in a slightly different light. I had a long chat with Becca. Do you know Becca at the Happily Ever Crafter?
Yeah.
Becca is...
Hi, Becca.
I love talking to Becca because whenever we talk, we just giggle so much. And she's great and she's done a lot for calligraphy.
Yeah.
So Becca does a lot of brush lettering. And she and I were talking about the difference between people who want to start teaching and people who have been teaching for a long time. So if you're a beginner, you might look at the work of somebody who's been teaching for a long time, and you might look at it and see it as something that is unattainable for you because it's so good. There is no way you are going to get that good. Of course, that's just you being not stupid. That is you being an idiot to yourself. Of course you can get that good. But as a beginner, you're looking at somebody who's been doing work, who's been doing calligraphy for 30 years. Of course, their work's going to be excellent. Their ability to repeat shapes, it's going to be far beyond what you have. You're just starting off. So Becca and I were talking about this, and she said, sometimes it's actually good for a beginner to learn from an intermediate, because that person, an intermediate person, the beginner will look at the person who's at an intermediate level and look at their work and think, I could do that. I could get there. I think that for a lot of beginners, not all beginners, for a lot of beginners, that's achievable. That's an inroad into the craft. So if those of you listening, if you decide that you want to teach, you need to consider the level that you're teaching at. And if you are only teaching beginners, are you really helping them? Or are you really going to cause problems for that beginner? So my teaching structure is very expansive and very rigid.
Oh man,
because
there are very few people that can teach like you. This is like, why you comparing?
But I've gone through, I was taught by Gaynor Goff and Gerald Minot. I was taught calligraphy, gilding, and heraldic painting. That was my study at university. That's what I was taught. Then I started to teach myself. I started to learn from others. I've had some brilliant mentors like Tom Kemp, whose mind is so structured. And Tom's Roman brush lettering is the best in the world. Hands down. Nobody can do brush lettering like Tom Kemp.
Of course.
Tom's book on brush lettering is a new innovative approach to how to hold the tool and create these shapes with accuracy that you just cannot get with a traditional hold. So when you're interacting with teachers like that, it really pushes you to push your craft. You know, when I developed my copperplate script, my model for copperplate script, I invented a whole new system for it. But all of that is through systematic thinking. You know, getting people to sit properly, getting them to breathe properly, to hold the tool properly, to make sure they can see the page without looking up under their hand. You know, if you're a teacher, you should be able to teach both left-handers and right-handers. And I know lots of right-handed teachers who won't teach left-handers because they don't understand how to teach them. So, you know, for me, that's a problem. If you can't teach right-handers and left-handers, you have no business teaching.
Yes, we'll cut your pens.
Because, you know, people are coming to you for help, you know, and you can't. I've heard some really awful stories about some teachers. I was teaching a class once and this girl was in the class and I was teaching copperplate. And this is 20 years ago. And I said, oh, you're left-handed? Oh, that's great. I'm really excited. And she was like, why? I said, oh, I love teaching left-handers. It's such a challenge because you really have to help them because there are 6 major ways a left-hander can hold a pen. And within those 6 categories, there are at least 5 subcategories in each category.
That's like 30.
And then, of course, you get a left-hander who comes into the class and you're just like, what? And you have to work with them. And I love it. I think it's great. And this woman gave up calligraphy 20 years ago. And I don't know how she ended up in my class. Somebody said, you know, go and see Paul. He will really help you. So I was in my 20s, you know, I was like 25 when I was teaching this class. And she was 60, 65. And I said, right, so try this. And this 65-year-old woman starts to cry in the class. So I gave her a hug. I was like, oh, it's okay. You know, it's not that difficult. She said, it's not that. She said, you know, 20 years ago, I was in a class and I went to learn copperplate script and the tutor told me he wasn't going to teach me because I should give up calligraphy because I'm left-handed and I would never be able to do it.
What the?
I hit the roof. I found out who the tutor was. I called the tutor and I lost it on the phone with the tutor because he stopped that woman from learning calligraphy.
Who's that guy?
I'm not going to say.
Say his name. Nobody should go to him. Say his name now. Seriously, I'm not joking. I'm so pissed right now.
It's okay. He's dead, so you can't go to him. So, you know, as a teacher, it is your responsibility to help the students. If you can't teach left-handers and right-handers, you really should not be teaching.
Yeah.
Because in order to teach a right-hander, I in my classes, I also get my right-handed students to try writing as a left-hander. I'm like, try this. And you make the right-handed students have a greater appreciation for their left-handed companions, because understanding how it works for both hands is really helpful. So, you know, apart from the right hand, left hand thing, you know, if you're teaching, you need to make sure your exemplars are good. If you're teaching and you steal somebody's exemplars and somebody finds out, I hope they burn you at the stake, because we work hard at making good exemplars. You can't just go stealing people's material. You know, I was looking at somebody online and I'm looking at this grid. And I'm like, the proportions of this grid looks really similar. So I sent her a message and I said, are you using my grid in your class? And she said, yes. And I said, why isn't my name on the grid? She said, oh, well, it was just a grid. I'm like, I specifically designed that grid based on this geometric principle. Do you know why I designed the grid this way? She said, no, it just works really well. I said, you need to email everybody you've taught and tell them that this is my grid. Because otherwise that's stealing. there's a level of plagiarism that, you can't get away with plagiarism. That is stealing somebody's work, somebody who spent the time to put that in. If you're creating an exemplar and that exemplar has been influenced by somebody else, you need to put on that exemplar these letter forms or this grid or XYZ or this concept of teaching was influenced by so-and-so. Because that's not yours. And so your students are now going to go, okay, so as I've had in other classes, people saying, I didn't come up with this theory of fourfold symmetry. This is Paul Antonio's theory. It's an excellent theory. I don't really understand it that well, but I'm showing it to you because it dramatically changed the way I teach copperplate script. So after the class, all those students end up sending me messages going, oh, I got introduced to your system. It's really good. I don't really understand it that much. And then I can take them from where they are to the next level. But if there's no provenance, if there's no information saying where that information was derived from, you're just leaving the students there. That's not a good educator. You are responsible. Putting out bad work is not good for students. I say we, Telmo and I have even seen people teaching, lots of students going to their classes, but we can't find one thing that this person has done. So we're like, well, what exactly is this person teaching? As a teacher, you are responsible to the student. As a student, you have a responsibility to yourself. If you go to somebody to learn and they're teaching you nonsense, that's your fault. You didn't do any research on that teacher. You've not done any research on the script. You don't know what the script looks like. You're taking for granted that is what that person is teaching. And you're just absorbing all the good and the bad together. Learning bad habits takes longer to unlearn than it takes to learn good habits. So if you really want to learn a script, find out what the name of the script is. Do some research. Do some research on teachers. The best way to learn a script and historical script
is to go to Paul Antonio's class.
Is historically. Look up. There are hundreds of libraries online who have manuscripts. Look up the script and a manuscript with that historical script and print it off. Look at the script. Look at what it looked like historically, because no teacher teaching you today will teach you from that exemplar. And, if you're looking at Textualis Quadrata. So when I did my lecture on Textualis Quadrata for my workshop, the thing that students came back and said was, I had no idea there were so many variations of Textualis Quadrata. We could take all of MILEN's followers and give them a different Textualis script from a different manuscript, and nobody will produce the same thing. There's that much variety to it. So, understanding what you're trying to do is really important. Otherwise you're wasting your time. Now, you might be learning because you just want to write. And that's great too. But don't say you're writing copperplate if it's not copperplate. Because as a student, both students and teachers are responsible here. And this is a huge responsibility. When you post something on Instagram.
Before you say anything.
Let me finish with this.
No, just leave it like this.
No. Let me finish it. Before you post something on Instagram, you have to remember that there are people who are not as good as you are, even though you don't think you're that good, because they're just starting off. So you're posting something saying, oh, this is copperplate. Somebody who doesn't even know what copperplate is will go, oh my gosh, that's really good. I really want to learn that. When you post, you have a responsibility. So tell people in the post, so this is my idea of copperplate. I'm still struggling with the script. I'm still learning, but it's really exciting. So a beginner just starting off, somebody just joining Instagram, coming across your work will go, oh, wow, he's still learning copperplate and it's this good. So what is this copperplate thing? So you've sort of said to them, I'm being responsible here. I'm sharing this information from you and I'm telling you, I still don't know what it is, but I love it. And this is what I'm learning so far. So, it's not just, the onus is not just on the teachers. The onus is also on the students. And as a student, if you see that somebody has stolen somebody's exemplar, it's your responsibility to report that person to the person who actually owns that exemplar. Because that's not fair. That's not fair on us.
Yeah. Next time more on this topic.
Next time Milen will bring bigger scissors.
Yes, and a knife and a samurai.
Do you remember the really beautiful scissors that I have? The really...
Yes.
They're lovely. Those are big scissors.
Okay, last topic for today. Old school calligraphers versus new school calligraphers or whatever. Like,
so this is a tricky topic. You know, when you wrote this, I was just like, are we talking about calligraphers who have died, or are we talking about calligraphers in the past? But you know, Milen also wrote down, where is it? Masters in history and those alive. So I think these are two different topics.
Okay, so which one we're gonna talk?
So let's talk about the more immediate topic of old school calligraphers versus new school calligraphers.
Okay.
Let me hear your take on this. Let me take this up. I'm starting to
for me, old school calligraphers is like, first of all, you're one of the old school, which I consider. Old school calligraphers for me are people which learned calligraphy in the proper way, where like they took the time and everything. They were not like, okay, I'm gonna learn it in 5 days or something like this. They were dedicated to learning properly like it was supposed to be. New school calligraphers for me is people who seen like videos and they're like, wow, I want to learn this so fast. And they go 5 days into calligraphy. Oh, I'm not doing anymore. Like something like this, you know. It's gonna be censored. It's okay.
You have to calm down.
But yeah, I don't know. Like in general. Oh, come on.
I don't know how we're going to get through this, you know, Milen. All right. So this is an interesting topic in that it encompasses all of us. Now, when I fell in love with calligraphy when I was 9, gosh, so long ago, I had no teachers because there wasn't anybody in Trinidad teaching calligraphy. People didn't even know what the word calligraphy was. And there were books. So I started working with the books, but as a severely obsessive compulsive child, I would sit, all my lines had to be straight, or I would have an absolute tantrum. So already my predisposition to obsessive compulsiveness really helped me with the craft. And I would sit and practice. And the thing that I did that I found that nobody else really did was I would correct the work. Mm-hmm. So I'd look at it. Why does this letter not look like this letter? It's the same letter. Why are the verticals not vertical? So of course, the first script I saw was fractal, but the first script I taught myself was what I called historically Old English, which I was copying a font. Eventually, I learned that this script was called Gothic, which was wrong, because it's not called Gothic.
It's a family.
We'll deal with this in another podcast, right? But eventually, so now, the script that I call Textualis Quadrata, which is its historical paleographical name, it's not Textura Quadrata. That's something else. So this Textualis Quadrata, I really sort of sat and I taught myself, and I spent 45 minutes every day practicing. It was a systematic learning.
Only 45 minutes?
Yeah. I was a child.
Come on, that's nothing.
I have to go outside and play, climb trees, eat fruit, And then when I trained as a calligrapher, when I came to the UK, I went to Reading and I studied letterform history. So James Mosley and Michael Harvey gave us this really amazing understanding of the history of letterforms. Then I went to Reigate and I studied with Gaynor Goff and Gerald Minot. And Gaynor taught us Roman caps, italic, foundational. I was doing copperplate script already. So I had this really formal training And, you know, Gaynor was taught by Anne Camp, and Anne Camp was taught by Edward Johnston. So there's this really wonderful tradition that I've been a part of. Then I left there and I went on to study archaeological illustration and manuscript and paleography. And the paleography dramatically changed the way that I saw calligraphy, because the paleography informed my mind as to what scripts were used in which manuscripts and what they were called. Because what we call scripts in calligraphy is slightly different to what the academic terminology is. So, for instance, in France, they write a script called Bâtard. This script is sometimes also referred to as lettre Bourgogne, right? But that term is quite expansive for lots of different scripts. But we calligraphers see it and we just call everything Bâtard, right? So the paleographical context for the naming of our scripts, for the taxonomy that we use, I find really fascinating. That you see my little, you know, obsessive compulsive mind putting things into categories. Now, I know lots of calligraphers. I went to school. I went to Reigate for 2 years with some brilliant calligraphers. You know, Neil Bromley went to Reigate. He is one of the world's leading heraldic artists. His work is excellent. His ability to paint and handle gold on vellum and that's a really formal traditional structure. Now, we were there full time. There were some students who couldn't afford to come full time, but they came once a week. But they still had that formal training that we had. Then, of course, there were evening classes. People who had normal jobs, they would take an evening class, or it might be a Saturday class. All the calligraphy societies tend to have a workshop once a weekend, one weekend, once a month. And so those people joining calligraphy guilds would go to the workshops and they would learn in a slightly different format to those of us who, you know, gave up 2 to 4 years of our time to actually go every day to study. So we have a very different approach to writing. We have a much more traditional approach to writing. But that doesn't mean that we have a non-contemporary approach to writing. Because some of these formal calligraphers have gone on to produce amazing contemporary works like Thomas Egmeyer, Brody Neuenschwander, Yves Letrem, Elmo van Singelen. I mean, all of these.
Yves does some crazy stuff like, wow.
But also Dennis Brown, you know, Dennis's historical work is excellent. But then you look at the direction that he's gone in with this layered glass, contemporary calligraphy, beautiful, beautiful stuff. Okay, but because all of our training was centered around letter forms, we have an amazing command of script and structure and really structured letter forms. Now, the newer school of calligraphers, we can split into a couple of categories.
Wait, is there 2 categories, new and old? What do you mean?
We have new and old, but we have subcategories, right? So in the new calligraphers, we have people like Bianca Mascora, Susan Cunningham,
Paul Antonio.
And you know.
Oh wait, which one do you consider yourself actually?
Pardon?
Which category do you consider yourself? Because are you like old school or new school?
That's a difficult. I think I sort of sit in the middle. Because even though I have all of this traditional understanding, and this is what happened when my teaching started. I was traveling and somebody said, "Oh, you travel to teach?" And I said, "Yeah." And then within, I don't know, must have been a week. I was on Instagram for like maybe a year. And then I was traveling and people saw that I was traveling, and within a week, I had 300 emails saying, "Can you come to this country? Can you come to this country?" So we collated all the countries and we saw, which had the highest numbers. And then we wrote to these people and said, "Okay, are you serious?" They're like, "Yeah, we'll set up the class and everything. You just come." And I was like, "Oh, okay." But my aim for traveling was, I saw that the traditionally trained calligraphers and the modern calligraphers were not getting along. And those of us who are traditionally trained, we have a responsibility to ensure that people who are doing calligraphy, doing it correctly is not a good way to say it.
No.
Have a better informed approach to the writing. The people who are doing modern calligraphy were messaging me saying, I'm really stuck and I don't know how to move forward from here. And I was thinking the reason you're stuck is because you have no idea what the original letter forms are. So unless you know where your letter forms come from, you can't augment them. They just don't quite work, but you don't quite know why. So I thought, you know what? I'm young enough. So this is 10 years ago. I'm young enough. I could travel a lot. Why don't I focus on the modern calligraphers and people struggling with understanding their craft? Because they were really at loggerheads with the formal calligraphers. And, I remember when modern calligraphy came out, those of us who were traditionally trained, we were horrified.
What do you mean modern calligraphy came out? Is there a point of time where, okay,
yeah,
today...
Yeah, about 12 to 15 years ago,
all right,
modern calligraphy started to happen.
Okay.
But don't forget, our letter forms evolve,
Yeah.
When you look at the Cancelleresca period, we go from the Gothic scripts into the Humanist minuscules into the Cancelleresca scripts. It's only when we leave the Cancelleresca period does italic evolve out of Cancelleresca. So there's no cut and dry timeline. Oh, it's this to this. The scripts evolve.
Mm.
And I remember quite a few of us sitting down going, look at this nonsense. Oh, it'll go away. It's too bad to live. It'll disappear. And after about 5 years, I thought, this is not going away. But what it is doing is it's bringing a lot of people to calligraphy. How do we get to those people? How do we help them get better letter forms? And how do we help them to recognize that they need to understand traditional calligraphy?
I wish more traditional or old school calligraphers were thinking like you, Paul. I have so many names in my head that I want to just pick.
But I'm sort of between the older calligraphers and the younger calligraphers because I'm young enough to be old enough and I'm also young enough to be young enough. So I'm right. A lot of modern calligraphy is centered around pointed pen work. And I know a lot about pointed pen scripts. So I was able to see what some of the problems were. And I've had so many modern calligraphers say to me, thank you so much for your teaching in copperplate script. It's really helped me to understand why I was stuck.
We have 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. I thought those were the scissors coming out. So people like Susan Cunningham who do both modern calligraphy and traditional calligraphy, Susan, she's really done a great blend of the two of them. And then, of course, you have people like Angelique, whose modern calligraphy is...
Who?
Angelique. She's this really, really lovely girl, and she produces these amazing letter forms that have such flair and movement and vitality to them. And even though they are so far away from the traditional scripts, they have this essence of vitality, of movement, of life, and an understanding of shape and form and scale and balance.
Okay,
and
in this case, is Pocras and Zephyr considered also like Angelique contemporary or whatever?
Well, you see, Angelique is a modern calligrapher. She's not a contemporary calligrapher.
Okay.
Contemporary calligraphy would the work of people like, Dennis Brown, Eves, Brody, Thomas Ingmeyer. Their work is contemporary calligraphy.
Okay. So
Pocras's work is contemporary calligraphy. Modern calligraphy is really that sort of bouncy up and down script thing that the modern calligraphers produce, right? But it all has its place. Now, the thing about modern calligraphy is it can be beautiful. When you see Bianca Moscoro do modern calligraphy or Kay Goodman, their calligraphy is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But they've spent time, Kay went back and she studied in grocers and she fell in love with traditional scripts. And I always try to get modern calligraphers to like historical calligraphy.
In the other way.
And learn it. And once they learn it and they come back to the modern calligraphy, they find that their modern calligraphy becomes much more structured. Even though it's more playful, it has more knowledge, more substance behind it, because you can't build a building without a good foundation.
Yes,
and our letter forms, it'll just collapse on you.
Of course, why not?
But of course, you know, then of course you have the other side of it, and that is, and this comes back to what we were talking about with the teacher. You know, there are lots of new people coming into calligraphy, and their idea of writing is something that's very immediate. They don't want to sit down and spend an hour every day practicing.
Lazy
so
people.
You have this proliferation of not so accurate script work. And that, you know, I hope that those people will look at their calligraphy and look at other calligraphers whose work is more accurate and smoother and clean, and say, how did they get there? And really start to embrace the historical stuff and bring that together.
You know what? I think Nibs, the podcast, will help a lot of those people. So if you people who are listening right now, if you're watching, like, share, whatever, like, spread those podcasts, like, so more and more people get the proper ideas about calligraphy, proper ideas about everything that we're talking about, because we are the masters. No, I'm joking. But yeah, I mean, you get the point. Thank you guys for listening, watching again. Subscribe, follow whatever platform you're listening or watching this. We see you, we talk to you next time. As always, keep writing.
Keep writing.
Yes.